Hello and welcome to the CPA Perspective Podcast, powered by Evolve Now, the future of accounting content. Evolve Now offers insights into the many areas of the accounting profession with daily videos and provides CPE credit for taking courses that teach you the skills necessary to become an advisor of the future.
All right. Hello and welcome everybody to the CPA Perspective Podcast, powered by Evolve Now. As you know, the podcast is just finding the great minds, the thought leaders that are representing the future of the accounting industry, finance, business. There's so much that's changing, so much that's evolving, and we're adapting to this new future that everybody really needs to sort of get on board with. And I think a great way to do that is by adding different perspectives from different individuals throughout the industry. Of course, people who are a little more exciting. Nobody wants the guy whose head is up against the webcam and he's talking to, about tax regulations and updates, but there's so much more that the accounting profession has to offer that we as CPAs and accountants can offer and can provide. So as you know, I am your host, the Rapping CPA, Drew Carrick, and I have Terrell Turner with me here. And I, as always, as per tradition, like to let them introduce themselves. So let's just get a little background here.
Yeah, thanks for having me on the show first. That's huge to be able to connect. Also, my background, I started off in accounting very similar to a lot of people who probably are CPAs or in the field of accounting. But early on, I think, I guess you say distaste for kind of the stereotype and the way that I saw a lot of people kind of trying to follow the stereotype about accounting, and to where I'm like, there's got to be a better way to approach this. And so I left public accounting. I started working in industry, worked for some of the world's biggest companies like Navistar or General Electric, worked in the US as well as in Brazil. And then my last corporate role I worked for a hyper-growth startup. So they've been definitely featured in the Inc. 5000 list a couple of times. And I was the director of FP&A there. And did several roles there, or I guess you say several major projects there before I decided, I want to take everything that I learned from accounting and finance and really launch my own firm.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I had a similar journey too. I did the public accounting sort of route, started out just doing that. And I had the same mentality. And I always reference this incident that I had. Actually, it wasn't an incident, but it was this sort of insight where the partner had came up to me and said, "What are you doing in accounting?" And I was like, What do you mean? Like, why are you here? He said, "Why are you here?" And I'm like, "It's 5:30 and it's busy season. I'm in the office." He's like, no, like, why are you here? Like in accounting when you're super creative. And I was like, I don't know, I'm getting the hours I need for my license. But I always had that sort of like ambition of there's other stuff too. So that's pretty cool. The big companies too. So what area were you in public when you started and then moved on into private?
Yeah, so I was in audit. So the I guess you say the people that you didn't like see coming.
It's funny because I feel like people are always like, "Oh, you're in accounting, great, you can do my taxes," and I'm like, whoa, like I'm not a tax accountant here, And they're like, "Oh, so what do you do?" "Oh, I'm an auditor." "Oh, don't audit me." I'm like, that's not how it works. I was like, we're getting hired by these companies, like they kind of have to have us there, yeah, but like. I'm not the IRS. Everybody always thinks you say you're an auditor. They think like you're the IRS. You're like, "Oh, you're going to come and nab me on my taxes." I'm like, everything that has to do with accounting doesn't always have to do with taxes. And it's one of those like stereotypes that's just like trying to break constantly.
I find that even now with having my own fractional CFO firm where a lot of people know because they see the 3-letter CPA, they're like, "Oh, can you help me with my taxes?" Yeah. Like, I understand them, but that's not where I specialize.
Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, like I can get you, obviously like I studied it and I'm talking about it regularly. So I can definitely provide some insight, but like the last thing I want to do, it's funny, like even accountants hate taxes. I feel like it's just like a mutually, like everybody hates taxes equally. And there are people who like think like, oh, well, that means I get a tax return. And I'm like, well, that's not always necessarily what you want. You don't want to be like, it's good for people who don't know how to save and don't know how to budget. Now they have this like forced savings that they can't spend. Though usually when they get it, they're like, oh, sweet. Like I got $1,000 tax return. I'm going to take a trip. And it's like, oh, it's great financial planning there. I think there's a big opportunity too for like accountants to actually, engage them with financial planners more often to sort of like marry those two, right? I don't know if you've probably seen some of that throughout your fractional work and other stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I've definitely seen that. I mean, and it makes so much sense because I always tell people, I mean, it's like when you're an accountant, you really get to see kind of behind the closed door for a lot of people's lives. I mean, because, when it comes down to your finance, even if, let's say, if you're a solo business owner or you're a small business owner, I mean, for someone to do your taxes, there are some pretty invasive questions that they got to ask.
Yeah.
And, when they start seeing stuff, because they're so familiar with the numbers, I think, they're in a good position to say, hey, if I know a financial advisor or if I know financial, personal financial strategies, I can bring those into the picture because you're probably in the best position to help that person because you're seeing stuff that other people aren't.
Yeah, I feel like, and I don't know if this is a potential opportunity for accountants moving into the future, but I really thought that there could be this cool thing where you're almost like their psychologist. Like you could be if you want, like, it's like that confidentiality. I know, where the line is as far as the ethics goes, but like, hey, you could tell your accountant anything, well, I'm thinking about getting divorced. How is this going to have my taxes? It's like, have you spoken to your wife about this? Like, no, not yet.
There's always, it's funny that you bring that up because when I talk to different people, because I am a CPA and they automatically think, oh, taxes, where there have been people like strangers that have shared stuff with me. Like, some of the strange stories I've heard is like, well, hey, well, you're a CPA, right? It's like, yeah. They're like, well, you know what? I have this mistress and I've been paying her. And I'm like, whoa, where's this going?
That's so funny.
I'm like, I don't think I'm the right person. I'm like, one is, I don't know you and you don't know me. And I don't think I really want to know about this.
Yeah, there is this like implied trust, of people that have, letters after their name in general, but especially CPA, because I think it is like they assume like, oh, you're kind of like a closed off introvert nerd. Like I could share things with you and you're not like going to spread it to the world. I'm like, well, don't do that to me because like I'm going to make a rap video about it. If you tell that to me, like that's going to be in a song next month. But it's so true.
Yeah, I mean, but I think, like I said, Ibby, on the serious side, I think that there's a lot of, like I said, a lot of trust that you said, and there's a lot of opportunity for, a good accountant, to start thinking outside of the normal box and to really find out, there's more that we can help with. Mm-hmm. And I always tell people, especially when I'm working with business owners, that, money is emotional. There's a whole lot more emotions that come involved when you're dealing with money, to where I spend a decent amount of time really helping clients feel comfortable about where they're at. Cause I'm like, this isn't a math situation or a numerical situation. This is an emotional thing. And we kind of got to get over that hurdle before they can actually start seeing, the benefits in their business. So I completely agree with you that, the field of accounting there's so much more to it. And I think the accountants who embrace that will be the ones that see better success in the future.
Yeah. And I to tie into that, I feel like, a lot of the times when I'm out here talking about, and like, cause I definitely like, put down or poop on the parade for the accounting community often, where I'm always like bashing it, but I'm not doing it in a sort of negative way to bash it. It's just that there are these things, like you said, that we need to look forward to in the future in order to become like more well-rounded advisors. You can't just be a tax guy and just be an audit guy. And it's not to discredit that any of that's valuable. Like people should still go get their CPA. Like it's still a good thing. Like we're talking about, people trust you. You can dangle it around a little bit too. And there's just immediate pride, like, oh, you're smart. It's like, yeah, I picked like the hardest of the business majors, but it's absolutely, true where you can, Yeah, I mean, it's an empathy factor. That's like a really cool perspective, is that emotional tie to money. And I always think about it from, people are like, oh, like, can you help me get like more back on my tax? Like somebody was like able to get me more back. And it always is like, it always rubs me a little weird, because I'm like, really, like your taxes should be it's like pretty black and white. It should be, I mean, like you could finagle with the gray areas of like, can I put this as an expense or not? But that's just a matter of like personality and like kind of preference of how risky are you going to go. But at the end of the day, it's like, no, there's a set number. It's not like I'm going to like magically find money for you. I'm just going to do whatever it is that's like allowed to be done. So it's the emotional aspect. Like you said, you could have the best accountant in the world. That's not going to change what you do with money. Either you're spending money or you're not spending money.
Yeah, no, I completely agree.
Yeah. So to kind of pivot onto that, doing things that are forward looking into the future, I think this is really cool. And I've only had the chance to check it out a little bit, but I want to hear about the business talk library, because I think that that's just like such a cool concept, and it's so timely. I feel like, you're like the hero that we all needed. You somebody to start saying like, hey, look, like we're fun. We're talking about real things that are relatable, and like the timing I think is so right for content. I mean, that's why we're doing things like this podcast and the Millennial Mind Show and other different shows that I'm involved in, and just creating content. It's so amazing to like, I'm very glad that we were able to connect, because it's hard to find people in the accounting industry who have that sort of like driven mindset and mentality about the future.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. And for me, that was kind of what was the genesis of like creating content, because maybe about 3 years ago, when I think I guess whenever it was that Trump signed into the new tax rules, and I just kept hearing people talking about, oh, well, it means this, it means this. And I'm like, okay, I don't specialize in tax, but I know that what you're saying is wrong. So I was like, so what my wife and I did is, I was like, how about we just create a video? Because my wife is a CPA as well.
Great.
And so I'm like, how about we just create a video and let's just talk about it from a common sense standpoint? Because it's not like I have a ton of accountants in my family or anything. So I'm like, let me explain it how I would tell my family members. And, we did that video. People really enjoyed it. They really liked it. And we're like, you know what, maybe there's room to do more of this.
Yeah.
And so we just continue creating content. And then so when I decided to leave my corporate job to focus on building up my CFO firm, I was like, this could become a great avenue for networking, marketing, as well as helping people see that, hey, an accountant can do more than just taxes and audit you. So we just continue creating the content, and I think it became a way to really let people see, like, the real side of, hey, accountants are human beings too, but not just the stereotype. And so we just really have been having a lot of fun creating, different shows. And one of our biggest ones has been the interviews, where in 2020, we filmed 232 interviews with other CEOs, founders, and executives, just to talk about the backstory of their business and their leadership journey, and building a relationship so they could tell the world their backstory, as well as we were connecting with them and we were learning from them, from their experiences as well.
Yeah, like I love the way that you're able to like evolve with the process too. And I mean, like over 200 is just like, that's an insane amount of stuff. I think that's like almost more than how many like weekdays there even are. That's like doing every single day, like an interview, which is pretty impressive. But it's cool how like that momentum gets going. And I think that's the personality trait that I would hope that we can instill in more people, is to just like hammer through those initial phases. Cause I mean, it looks really cool, I'm sure, for you to look back and be like, wow, look at last year, look at all these things that I've done. And obviously the schedule that you have of everybody for this year. And now all of a sudden you have this like massive backing behind you, where it's like, I've done a lot, I've accomplished a lot. And that motivates you to accomplish even more. That's really impressive too. And to go back to the Trump thing for a moment, when the tax came in, it's so funny, because I remember people being like, hey, I got all this more money in my paycheck each week, and then everybody was like, at the end of the year, they're like, like I owe money on my taxes. I was like, yeah, because it didn't always just necessarily like adjust like the right way, that everybody was like flipping out to like, I thought I was getting more money, now I have less money. I was like, at the end of the day, you're still going to have like the same amount, like whatever the rule is, like that's how much you'll end up in your pocket, like come April 15th, one way or the other.
Yep, absolutely. I mean, and I think that, that was one of those simple things that we were trying to break down for people, especially, after the rules went into play and then people filed their tax return. They're like, well, why is my tax return, smaller this year? I'm like, okay, let's go through a simple math
Yeah.
equation. This is how much money you made. This is how much you paid in taxes. This is how much you should have paid. It's just simple math at that point.
Yeah.
And if we look at 2019, or we look at 2018 versus 2019 and versus 2020, like here, it's simple math. And people were just like, well, I think he did something, he screwed me over. Like, no, it's math.
Yeah, it's just math. And that's the thing is like numbers don't lie. Everybody likes to, I think accounting, I would love accounting to be like the new science. You know what I mean? Like everybody's talking about, well, the science says this. I was like, hey, let's take it even a step further back from that. How about the numbers? Let's just talk the numbers. And I think there's a real opportunity now, especially for accountants to like step into those leadership roles and like become, we talked about the trust that people have in CPAs. And if, again, this is that sort of personality trait that I don't know how many accountants recognize it. Like you saw the opportunity, like I see the opportunity, and I hope, more viewers and people who are in the industry see the opportunity to really, you can step into that leadership role, be that trusted person. Like you have the degree. It just takes a little bit of drive, a little bit of ambition, a little bit of that entrepreneurial mindset. And the cool thing, and the thing I like about the Business Talk Library as well is you're taking all those three elements. So not only is it, you're having fun making the content, right? You're also getting to network and meet these, these individuals who have impressive backgrounds and are doing incredible things. And you're learning about how they're doing it, how you can apply it to your own business. And then also the potential to help them if, of course, if you're meeting with the CEO and they're like, oh, actually, we need somebody to step in for the next 3 months and help with some finance sort of work. You have that too. And then it's just the benefit that everybody in general gets as a content viewer to just receive it. So it's from all angles. I like to refer to like the triple bottom line, which of course like involves the environment and stuff like that too. But it is that I think there's a shift from your revenue is not simply, well, here's what the net income was, or here's what the dollar amount was, but it's all the rest of that, it's the marketing, the branding, the connections, the network, the benefit of just the altruistic giving back to the community. So it's valuable for sure.
Yeah, I mean, and that part has been very fun. I mean, just talking to people who, who aren't, accountants or finance professionals in their business, but to hear the things they explain, because a lot of the CEOs and founders, in talking to them, like some of it comes out in the interview, and then afterwards, off camera, we're having different conversations. And one of the things that I saw to be a very significant trend is a lot of them would talk about, they didn't realize how much finance and accounting was involved in their role as a CEO and a founder before they stepped into that role. But now being in that role, they're like, I wish I would have had a better foundation in it. And that was something that jumped out to me even when I worked at General Electric. And, I had the privilege of meeting with a lot of the like the division CEOs or the senior executives. And one of the things that I noticed is that a lot of them started off in a finance or an accounting role. And they were like, that was the thing that gave them the leg up to become the senior executive over their peers who may have started in, let's say, engineering, or may have started in, on the operation side, because they understood at that level. I mean, you got to be able to talk the story of the numbers. You got to be able to translate the actions into financial impact. And they were like, accountants and the finance team are the best people to be able to do that. So it's easier to learn the operational side than it was to learn the accounting when you're like, 10, 15 years down the road.
Yeah, it's because the numbers, I would say, in finance is a totally different language. So it's like going, it is one of those easier directions. And I mean, I always joke around about how, like, the people who are, a lot of people started out in the accounting major back in college, and then you slowly saw people drip out and into some people who were still trying to like hold strong, but they couldn't handle accounting. They went to like finance, so investing terms and stuff like that. And that was good for them. And then some of the people that were just like, like, I don't know what I'm thinking of doing. And they like copped out to like either general business or like marketing or management. But the thing is on the flip side, I felt like when I went into grad school and I was actually taking some more in-depth marketing courses, you realize how involved the numbers are. And I learned it when I was involved with like the capstone course, and we had to run the mock for a business, and they had the different tabs, like how are you going to manage your people, and how are you going to, how are you going to manage the finances? What's your strategy going to be? What's your go-to-market strategy? And then like, how are you going to price everything? The pricing of all the items, like that's very much so marketing, but it's also, numbers is involved with all of it. The management of the people, well, how much are you going to pay each person? Like you're involved with every conversation. And like the CFO that's really like a central role. Like CEO, you need that visionary to sort of like drive like the vision forward. But I think that there's like an insane value if you're able to really consolidate that from finance up into operations, because of how involved and connected finance is and accounting and the numbers are into every aspect of the business.
Absolutely. And that's been kind of my journey. After I left public accounting and going into working in industry, from my time at Navistar to time at GE and even at the tech growth company that I was at, finance, I was heavily involved with talking with the non-finance teams, because as they were trying to figure out what to do next, their question consistently was, okay, all right, if we do this, what does it do to the numbers? Because it's like they always had to have, someone like me or the CFO in on those discussions, because it's like, yes, this may sound great if we go do this marketing idea, but what do the numbers look like if we do this? And then that's when they would say, after they got that, okay, then they would say, okay, all right, now we're good to move forward.
Yeah. No, it's because like you said, it's tied into everything, and you need that voice there. So if you have the ability to be that one individual, as opposed to like needing to have, well, we got to bring this person on, this person on, but if you can embody all of those roles, as starting with the CPA, like that's a great core to sort of start. So we're having, of course, these skills are like, some people think it's just like you're fortunate enough to like be born with the ability to talk to people or to translate stuff. But like, what do you think CPAs should be doing and can be doing in order to actually like get these sorts of skills? Because the question is like, do you think, are we anomalies? Are some of the people that we've been fortunate to network with and speak to, we're out here talking about it and preaching like, well, you got to be good at operations too. There's a huge opportunity, but for somebody that maybe, okay, now they see it and they're like, oh, that is a good point. I have the CPA and there's an area where people do trust me. I have noticed people trust me. How do I kind of progress and gain those things? So it's like, well, I've always been an introvert, and I'm not necessarily comfortable giving presentations, or I kind of like to just do this. How do you help them gain those sorts of skills?
Yeah, I always tell people, think about me. When we first started studying accounting, it wasn't like, we knew how to do derivative accounting, or we even knew what derivative accounting was or anything. It's like it took time to develop those skills. And just like it took us time to develop our accounting skills, like it's just going to take time to develop other skills. Because I always laugh when people tell me like, Terrell, I've seen your show, you look like a natural on camera. And I'm just like, well, you didn't see when I first started. Like, back when I first started, actually, my wife came up with the idea like, hey, we should do videos, because I'm like, I'll just write a blog or whatever. And she was like, no, we should do videos. And I'm like, after like, 2 weeks of her bringing that up, I'm like, all right. After every day after work for like 2 weeks straight, I would just go into the basement of my house, set up my cell phone, and I would just practice in front of the phone, just recording it. And go back and watch it. It's like, ugh, that looks horrible. And I think, like I said, because I knew that, hey, I didn't just, show up for the CPA exam and just aced it. It's like I had to study and practice. And I think sometimes we underestimate that people who are good at, talking and communicating, like they aren't just naturally good communicators. It takes time. And so I went back to like times where I was, reading books like, books like How to Win Friends and Influence People, because I was probably more of your stereotypical accountant, like, let me do my stuff in the background. But I'm like, if I'm going to get better at interacting with people, and, I got to find some way to do it. And so I just started there. And then whatever I read, I was like, hey, let me just go ahead and practice it. The worst thing that could happen is I can find out the book was a lie, but the best thing is maybe it's true.
Right. It's like, what's the cost really of just reading the book? And it's so funny how people discredit any sort of help that they can get in those other areas that they just view as like, oh, they're just a good actor. It's like, no, people go to, like, you practice acting. Like, you're not just like naturally a good actor. You could be a dramatic person, sure, but that doesn't mean that translates into like, oh, I'm a natural speaker, I'm a natural good actor. Usually, if you're more outgoing, of course, it'll help because you're probably speaking more often, but it's really that experience of constantly doing it. Like you said, for accountants, I think the best way that they can view it is you have to treat it like a science. Like you said, you have to treat it like this is your textbook, but it's teaching you a soft skill. Like the hard skills and soft skills, like it's almost like I almost want to eliminate the terms, because it's just some is like technical details that you're reading on, like how to do something, but it's just a different type of skill. You would apply the same methods, like how to speak, how to do the books, how to do taxes. It is very much so a science.
Mm-hmm. I completely agree. And I always tell people, I mean, every skill can be learned. I mean, it's not like, a talent. I mean, it's not like, public speaking is not the same thing as like being a athlete. I mean, there's some certain level of talent that, Usain Bolt has. Now, there's a ton of skill that he's developed, to perfect that talent. But, some of it is a talent. But when it comes down to speaking, it's just like, if you can move your mouth and you can actually get sounds to come out, after that, it's just skill. Just develop it and fine tune it. And I think it comes with a lot of practice. And I tell, a lot of accountants, when it comes down to, podcasting, I will say I started off with just writing blogs because the blogs helped me clarify my thoughts. And then after the blogs, I moved into creating videos because it's like, when I got good at being able to clarify my thoughts in writing, now let me get good at clarifying my thoughts in speech. And I just kept practicing and doing it over. And then even with doing like all the interviews in 2020, I mean, it's just like, all right, if you know that your job as a CPA is very critical to any business, how about you just practice talking to CEOs and founders? And that's kind of what I use the show to do, is like, hey, this is the person I'll be able to talk to when I'm working on a job or when I bring on a new client. So let me just practice in a risk-free environment, because it's my show. I can always edit it. If they hate it, hey, so what?
Yeah. No, you could, and that's like where I feel like a lot of accountants get tripped up, is they think, oh, well, you're entrepreneurial minded, so like you're ambitious like that and you want to do these things. But to pivot it to like somebody with just like a normal career, they don't have ambition necessarily of having their own firm or something like that. But if you're looking to progress throughout your career, if for nothing else, you now have on your resume, like, I'm used to speaking with C-level suite, executives. I'm used to speaking with the owners of firms. That makes you that much more valuable, even if you were to go back into the industry. You know what? I'm done owning my own business. I want to go back in. Well, hey, look at all of these connections I've made. Look at how well I am at speaking to other individuals. And now perhaps, a big company wants somebody that can go present, can go do the networking. I mean, the skills aren't just for people who are entrepreneurs from the sense of I'm going to own my own business, but they're the skills I think that people would be very useful for people in their actual just corporate career ladder of going through their career.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, because, I give, there's two examples, one of myself, one of my wife. So for myself, I mean, when I started creating videos, I mean, the last corporate job that I had, when I showed up in the interview, they had seen some of my videos already. So it's just like, when I showed up in the interview, they remembered me a whole lot more than everybody else that they were interviewing, because they're like, well, we've seen him talk about accounting and finance. We've seen some of his videos. We like the confidence that he has in the videos. So I know for a fact that's part of the reason why they called me back within like 4 hours after my interview and offered me the job instead of everybody else. And even for my wife, like, my wife is, she's fluent in multiple languages. So we launched the show to do the Business Talk Library in Spanish. And she'd done maybe like 4 videos in Spanish. And she got a call from a recruiter about, hey, they're looking for a new CFO to run a business because they have a big presence in Latin America. They saw her speak Spanish on the video and they wanted to talk to her about the job.
Wow. That's incredible.
Yeah. So, I mean, like you said, I mean, there's definitely a ton of professional value out of getting out of your comfort zone and creating content. I mean, it makes you more visible because I always think about it like when you see different athletes and, for example, when, I will say, somebody like, a very visible player, they may not even be the best in the league, but they're a visible player. And what you know for sure is that player will very rarely ever have to like worry about, hey, will a team pick me up? I mean, if they're a
Right.
decent player, they're visible, they're marketable, you know what? Their reputation is gonna open doors for them. And I think a lot of accountants are shying away from the opportunity of like, hey, put yourself out there
Mm.
because it'll open professional doors for you or entrepreneurial doors.
Yeah, it's so funny because I was like always about that and preaching that, and a lot of people are like, oh, well, my reputation, or oh, like I don't want to get on camera, and I was like, well, as if there's something to lose by not doing it, but exactly putting yourself out there, and that's the reason I was able to get found to do a lot of the opportunities that I've had to speak and to work for different companies is exactly right. It's that putting yourself out there and letting the universe return to you, what it will, but it's not going to happen unless you kind of stick out your arm first in order to actually receive it. What do you
Absolutely.
think? So what do you think is the best piece of career advice that you've received then over the course of your career?
Yeah, I would say, I mean, when it came down to, deciding whether or not I needed to, change jobs, whether it was within the same company or another company, one of the pieces of advice that someone told me is that, if your job is no longer challenging you, like if there's a part of your job that still doesn't, make you a little uneasy because you don't have it down pat, then if that doesn't exist, you're probably staying in a job way too long. It's time for you to move on. And I think that was great advice because as I started looking at other people around me, like that had gotten so comfortable in their job, what I started seeing was one is their professional development started going backwards, their reputation started taking, it started slowing down. And eventually after I talking to some of those people, they were unhappy in the role that they were in, and they were just kind of waiting for retirement. And I was just like, man, you're 32. Like that's a long
Yeah.
time.
Wow. Yeah,
So
I
I
don't.
would. Oh, go ahead.
No, I don't understand how people just accept that, like as a fate, and they're just like, well, as if well, if you learn some skills to maybe like speak up or talk to the management or leaders at the company, then and if they are at least decent leaders, they'll be receptive to that. It's just a matter of learning how to communicate to them properly, as opposed to just sitting there being like, oh, I guess I'll get my annual raise and I'll get my annual promotion and I'll just sit it out for the next 25 years.
I mean, and it was just so depressing seeing like other people, in that situation. And, because, I came from an environment where, like I said, most of the people in my, immediate environment growing up, they weren't, the corporate world wasn't their normal world. So a lot of people looked at it as, hey, you've made it. But I was getting to a point where the job I was doing to where it's like, okay, I kind of got this, it's no longer challenging. And that's kind of where that career advice came in. Like, if your job isn't challenging you anymore, you need to like set your eyes on something bigger, because if you're not being stretched, I mean, it's kind of like a muscle. If it's not growing, it's shrinking. And you're too early in your career to start shrinking at this point. Now, they were like, if you were 58, in retirement was like literally a couple of years away, or you were much older and you had just kind of settled into a role, maybe, might be a good idea. But, especially when you're pretty young and you have many years to go, it's just like, you should be continuing to stretch yourself. And I know it gets a little scary, but
Right.
the more you stretch yourself, the more you'll realize that, hey, going through that process is not as bad as it seems at first. And once you figure out how to stretch yourself and go to the next level, it becomes easier every time you do it.
Yeah, people shouldn't be scared of learning. I've learned as I've gotten older to like enjoy learning. I loved going back to college and just taking college classes when I was working at a college, just because it's just cool. And it's funny because you see other people in the class like, oh, I have to be here. And I'm like, this is exciting. Like, no, I don't want to do like the homework and stuff ever, but I enjoy the conversations that I'm having in class and just the idea of learning. And I think there's an opportunity, because let's be real, 95% of the people that hear us talk about this are just going to be like, yeah, rah, rah, rah. All right. And then go back to doing the same thing that they're doing. But that opens the door for that 5% to really excel, because if these other people think, oh, I'm already too far behind the 8 ball. Like there's no, like I can't catch up. Like there's already somebody doing that, or there's other people who are already good enough speakers. Like I'm not gonna be able to catch them. The fact that so few people actually take the initiative to go invest in themselves and do things like that opens the door for the few that decide like, I do want to go pursue this. And now suddenly you could very easily rise to that top 5%, like that cream of the crop.
Yeah. I mean, and I think for a lot of people, I mean, that, like I said, when you look at any type of success statistics in any field, I mean, there's a very small percentage of people who are actually successful. And a lot of that is because only a very small percentage actually try.
Yeah. What is it? Is it like the 2% rule? They have all those like different like rules of thumbs, but I feel like I've been seeing a lot of videos like on Elon Musk, since he's been all the rage lately. Just like the mentality and people don't pick up, they think like, oh, they're just like super smart or super brilliant, or they just have this genius complex about them. And they're absolutely brilliant people, but it's really just that sort of like delusional drive of, you never see them stressing or getting like worked up when there's hundreds of millions of dollars in flux at any given moment. And there's not a single stressed bone in that body, because it's just like, it'll come, it'll go. And it kind of ties back to that whole emotional attachment with money and how you kind of view it and how you view finances and just your understanding of the business world as a whole. So that's pretty cool.
Absolutely.
So I like to finish up with a little bit of fun. One of those being, this is a cool concept that we just sort of came up with. And I was like, you know what, I'm going to roll with this. CPA, but it can only, what does it stand for? But it's wrong answers only.
One of the thoughts I would say is confused person again. Because I would tell people, like, as a CPA, you get introduced to so many different concepts. Like when there are new accounting standards come out, like everybody just goes back through this confusion cycle. Yeah. Like, okay, there's a new rule. All right, we got to learn it again. Mm-hmm. And I think one other one that I heard someone say once, it was CPA is like a coefficient polynomial analyst. And I was like, what? And it stood out to me because I'm like, that's probably one of three of the most, I guess you say, ridiculous combined words of like some advanced mathematics. But yeah, I say that because when people find out that I'm an accountant, one of the stereotypes is like, oh, you're good at math. And it's just like, that's a mathematician.
It's completely true, because everybody, that's another one of those stereotypes that like, I kind of get it, but it's like, no, like somebody who's good at math is like you said, a mathematician. It's somebody that maybe majored in math. Like numbers is in everything. It doesn't just mean, oh, numbers equals math. And there's this weird stigma that just numbers and math are the same thing when they're just not.
Yeah, they're really, I was like, accounting is a little bit more about business than it is mathematics. Yeah. Like there's math involved, but I mean, to be honest with you, I mean, we're probably not going past algebra 1.
Yeah. It's so true. And I think you think about like, I mean, from the days of auditing, and I remember from the days of auditing, I mean, it's almost like monkey work, really. You have to be professional and like intellectual about how you approach it, but you're just taking a checklist. And obviously somebody that doesn't have the background is going to have a difficult time doing the job well, because they're going to see this checklist. They're like, all right, well, check to make sure the numbers are the same, but not really understanding like why that's important or what the meaning is. And then if something comes up, they're not really going to necessarily get it. But just in general, it's kind of that just checklist monkey work where you're just going down. And it's more words actually than numbers most of the time. It's a lot of instruction. It's a lot of explanation, and then a lot of footnotes.
Absolutely.
So, well, thank you so much for being on the show. I think it was a tremendous perspective to add. I really loved, especially the whole empathy concept and kind of tying all the different elements together of the value of putting yourself out there, creating content. And my favorite thing, I think, is just this whole notion of learning. And, you wouldn't expect, like you said, you confused over and over again, you wouldn't expect to just know the new tax law the moment it comes out, or the new audit regulations. Like, you go to company training and most people don't pay attention, and then they have to learn on the fly. But it's really no different than the reason most people end up becoming better at and going through their career at a firm is because they're used to dealing with the client. And it's not because they actually invested in learning in themselves. They were just like, hey, you got to go have a meeting with the client. So it's kind of like baptism by fire. It's get in there, start talking. You do that enough, eventually you're good. And everybody's like, oh, well, they've been doing it for a while, so that's why they're good. It's like, yeah, well, there's no reason you can't speed up that process by practicing doing that. And you don't have to wait until your partner in order to get good at speaking with people. You can start to invest in yourself now and just learn the skills. So when the time comes, one, you're already above everybody else and you're the first one to get thrown in there, and you're more comfortable doing it when you get there. Absolutely.
I totally agree with that.
So anyway, so I loved all the insight. I loved the perspective. And so if people wanted to get in contact with you in order to, whether it's for business, for branding, for just networking and connecting, what's the way to get in contact?
Yeah, I'll say, the easiest way for all of that, is you can go to LinkedIn, Terrell A. Turner, CPA. I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. Also, for people from a services standpoint, you want to talk about the actual accounting firm side and the consulting firm, it's the TLTurner Group.com. And there's a button on the front page of set up a consult. Let's just have a conversation and find out what's going on.
Absolutely. And then, of course, to check out the business talk, because that's just, again, it's that's the example that I think everybody can see of hey, this is what putting yourself out there and helping the community does. And now look at, here's prime example of the reward that comes with that, what comes with a little bit of investing. And you could see the progress, you could see the constant improvement. You could see now the massive inventory of interviews and conversations. If you don't know where to start, here you go. You have a great place to look to see this is how it's done.
Absolutely. Yeah. You can drop by, www.businesstalklibrary.com. And like I said, when you get there, you'll see all the great things, the different shows that we're doing. And like I said, you get to see, real conversations with real business owners, real professionals. And then for the audience, if you speak Spanish or you understand Spanish, hey, there's something there for you too as well.
Yeah, it's exactly. It's another one of those skills. We can I feel like we can go all day about all the different skills. You think of it as just speaking. It's just a language, and it's but that's a prime example of what could be theoretically a soft skill, right? Nobody considers a language a hard skill or technical skill, but it is an incredible skill nonetheless. So. Anyway, before we continue the rambling on, I definitely look forward to staying in contact, to networking. I encourage everybody to reach out and connect. And I definitely look forward to seeing how the journey progresses, especially with seeing how the content inventory evolves and continues to grow, and the amazing people that you're networking with. And I'm sure we'll be in touch soon.
Absolutely.
All right, everybody. This has been the CPA Perspective Podcast. As always, the rapping CPA, Drew Carrick, and I hope to see you guys next time.
This was the CPA Perspective Podcast on Evolve Now. Become the professional you want to be with the innovative knowledge you need. Click the link in the description or go to www.evolvenow.biz to continue on your learning journey. Start today. Evolve now.